Russell is also a very interesting individual, philosopher, that supposedly supported humanity, which is funny, seeing he created one world governance, or the concept of one world governance. He has said a few things as well that maybe that I can see is a part of our current issues in our current climate. So I think that's important to note. So there's a quote by him where he says, "Religion is something left over from the infancy of our intelligence. It will fade away as we adopt reason and science as our guidelines." 1931, Bertrand Russell predicted that Europe will become Haiti when whites in Europe become less and less, and there'll be mass migration of Africans, and China will be the new world order, which is very, very interesting. And this is 1931. This is before World War II. This is before the 1970s UN pacts and so forth. So this is a book. This is somebody else's notations. This is also somebody else's post. If the white population dwindles, there will be an increasing tendency to leave the rough work to men of other races. In the long run, this will lead to mutinies and reduce Europe to the condition of Haiti. In such circumstances, it would be left to the Chinese to carry on our scientific civilization, the one without religion. But in proportion as they acquire it, they too will acquire a lowered birth rate. I wonder if that has anything to do with the rule of the one-child policy. That was their prior while they were building up China. It is therefore, because that was actually during the economic development of China, that there was that one-child policy. Interesting. It is therefore impossible for a scientific civilization to be stable unless artificial methods are adopted for stimulating breeding. It is therefore impossible for a scientific civilization to be stable unless artificial methods are adopted for stimulating breeding. There are powerful obstacles in the way of adoption of such methods, both financial and sentimental. In this matter, as in the matter of war, scientific civilization will have to become more scientific if it is to escape destruction. Whether it will become more scientific with sufficient rapidity, it is impossible to foresee. But things were put in place. We have seen that scientific civilization demands worldwide organization if it is to be stable. We have considered the possibility of such an organization. We, just like Soros says, we. We have considered the possibility of such an organization in matters of government. British government. Bertrand Russell is a part of it, we already know this. But he's literally saying that we shall now consider it in the economic sphere in matters of government. I'm guessing he's generally talking about matters of government, rather than being in government. But obviously, knowing his position in British society at the time, it's interesting. We shall now consider it in the economic sphere. At present, production is organized as far as possible nationally by means of tariff walls. Every nation tries to produce at home as much as possible of the goods that it consumes. This tendency is on the increase, and even Great Britain, which formerly aimed at maximizing its exports by means of free trade, has abandoned this policy. Interesting. By 1955, I think the idea was developed, rather than war on mankind being the issue to push one world governance, then it really changed to energy waste and then climate change. So by 1955, Manifesto on Sustainable Energy by physicist Albert Einstein and philosopher Bertrand Russell. Interesting how Einstein was in collusion with Bertrand Russell. Shall we put an end to the human race, or shall we urge mankind to wear double-knitted woolen underwear to combat energy waste? 1955. Regarding the psyops that are being played out and the ideological conflict between the monarchy, the traditional monarchy, and the traditional ideologies and identity branding of the monarchy, which is played out with Todge and Nut versus the monarchy, as the narrative goes, is actually something that Bertrand Russell has also discussed. And what's being played out now as we speak with the whole sovereign individual, the use of cryptocurrencies, of individual, individual overpowering of the system, anarchy, modernism that can't, and chaos that can't be put into an order. And it's interesting how that's been played out versus traditionalism. And this is what Bertrand Russell says about it. Every community is exposed to two opposite dangers: ossification through too much discipline and reverence for tradition on the one hand, on the other hand, dissolution or subjection to foreign conquest through the growth of an individualism and personal independence that makes cooperation impossible. In general, important civilizations start with a rigid and superstitious system, gradually relax and leading at a certain stage to a period of brilliant genius, while the good of the old tradition remains and the evil inherent in its dissolution has not yet developed. But as the evil unfolds, it leads to anarchy, thence, inevitably, to a new tyranny, producing a new synthesis secured by a new system. The impact of science on society, Bertrand Russell. Education should aim at destroying free will so that after pupils have left school, they shall be incapable, throughout the rest of their lives, of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. It is to be expected that advances in physiology and psychology will give governments much more control over individual mentality. Diet injections and injunctions will combine from a very early age to produce the sort of character and the sort of beliefs that the authorities consider desirable, and any serious criticism of the powers that be will become psychologically impossible. The congenital differences between rulers and ruled will increase until they become almost different species. The congenital differences between rulers and ruled will increase until they become almost different species. A revolt of the plebs will become as unthinkable as an organized insurrection of sheep. This is the guy who is pro-humanity. Or is he meant to be talking like as though this may happen and he's against it? Back to 1953. Biowarfare is more effective for depopulation and social engineering than war. Impact of science on society, pages 103 to 104, and will lead to global governance. I do not pretend that birth control is the only way in which population can be kept from increasing. There are others, which is funny considering, right, our current circumstances, what's in the news at the moment. There are others, which one must suppose. Opponents of birth control would prefer war, as I remarked a moment ago, has hitherto been disappointing in this respect, but perhaps bacteriological war may prove more effective. If a Black Death could be spread throughout the world once in every generation, throughout the world once in every generation, survivors could procreate freely without making the world too full. Hence the use of vaccines. I feel sick. I feel so sick. Okay. There will be nothing in this to offend the consciences of the devout or to restrain the ambitions of nationalists. The state of affairs might be somewhat unpleasant. The state of affairs might be somewhat unpleasant, but necessary, of course. Eugenics is necessary every generation to take down the masses, to control global population for control reasons and purposes, and to, I guess, reduce costs. Alrighty. I am wondering from the question of stability to which I must return. There are 3 ways of securing a society that shall be stable as regards population. The first is that of birth control. The second, that of infanticide, or really destructive wars. Infanticide, killing children. Birth control, or really destructive wars. And the third, that of general misery, except for a powerful minority. And the third of general misery, except for a powerful minority. So, general misery, not for us, but not for the aristocracy that rules, including Bertrand Russell. All these methods have been practiced. The first, for example, by the Australian Aborigines. The second by the Aztecs, the Spartans, and the rulers of Plato's Republic. The third in the world as some Western internationalists hope to make it, and in Soviet Russia. So he was for Soviet Russia. Pro-Soviet Russia, if you're pro these measures. You're pro the culling of Australian Aborigines once we were colonised here. The kidnapping of those children, the taking from their mothers. Another control measure to colonise and control the colony, the new colony of Australia, as much as the famines in India, as much as the terrorism in Egypt and Palestine. I guess he worked in conjunction with Winston Churchill, so that makes sense regarding Soviet Russia. It is not to be supposed that Indians and Chinese like starving, but they have to endure it because the armaments of the West are too strong for them. BRICS, hey? Of these three, only birth control avoids extreme cruelty and unhappiness for the majority of human beings. Meanwhile, so long as there is not a single world government, there will be competition for power among the different nations. And as increase of population brings the threat of famine, which we now know famine is a Wealth of Nations. Well, Wealth of Nations said that was an unnatural measure for force that was used in India to control colonies, as much as what he's saying now about birth control, about all of these different measures. This was one. Famine is one. So him saying that as a consequence to not bringing about one world governance is absolute bullshit, because one world governance does that. National power will become more and more obviously the only way of avoiding starvation. There will therefore be blocks in which the hungry nations band together against those that are well fed. That is the explanation of the victory of communism in China. These considerations prove that a scientific world society cannot be stable unless there is a world government. It may be said, however, that this is a hasty conclusion. All that follows directly from what has been said. So he's philosophizing. He's trying to philosophically, economically, politically justify a one world government. This is the whole point of this book. And he's telling us what measures will need to be put in place. I'm guessing that are happening because there's not a one world government, when in fact the one world government is creating these measures and forcing this upon us to then say, oh, look at how bad the governments are, which are already controlled. Look at how bad nationalism is, how much anarchy there is. I just feel sick with that whole infanticide. I feel sick with the vaccines. I just can't believe this is happening. If you, yeah, okay. All that follows is directly what is, from what has been said, is that unless there is a world government which secures universal birth control, there must be from time to time be great wars in which the penalty of defeat is widespread death by starvation. In which case you've got weather controls now, because the wars aren't working, because you can't have a global war that will starve us all out. That is exactly the present state of the world. And some may hold that there is no reason, I don't know the rest because it's, no reason why it should not continue. For, I don't know what else is said. Yeah, okay. I think there's enough of that sort of information, but I want to express these things because there is, as I keep reiterating an importance of history to be looked at, discussed, considered that comes from one place, one group of people, one group of elitists, one group of investors, etc., etc. And it's, it's very important. I think that we look into these things to see what is actually, how it's relevant to what's going on in today's world, because this is what's happening now with us is all planned and has been planned for a very, very, very long time. Eugenics, Malthusian eugenics, is a thing. Fabianism is a thing. Mostly all British concepts. Look into these things and make up your own mind. I definitely encourage making up your own mind. And if you don't believe this is relevant, then, I completely respect your opinions and your views. If you wanted to look more into this, I suggest the full analysis of Bertrand Russell by Jay Dyer on YouTube. If you look into that, I can put up a link there under this video. I think that's about it. It's a pretty, it's a big slap of evil in your face. So I apologize for that, but it's but history is really, really key into looking and to gaining clarity as to what's happening in today's world and what we're enduring and what we are victims of. Thanks, guys.